Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Stayntouch Product Enhancements, version 5.55, additional schedules for auto deposit collection, tourist tax as a separate line item, and more, presented by Stayntouch Implementation Consultant, Julia Josephson. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at Stayntouch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of the Stayntouch PMS version 5.55 product release. In this webinar, we will show that the guest balance report and rooms out of order and out of service reports are now exportable via CSV, illustrate the UI enhancements to the alert received upon property group deletion, demonstrate that budgets do not accept negative values, show that tourist tax has been added as a separate line item on the confirmation letter and group confirmation letter, discuss the additional schedules option for auto deposit collection, highlight that balance due will display at check-in for Stayntouch Guest Kiosk and Stayntouch Guest Mobility, explain that add-ons purchased during check-in are included in authorization for Stayntouch Guest Kiosk, show that the PMS will prompt for additional guest information during check-in when there is more than one guest for Stayntouch Guest Kiosk and Stayntouch Guest Mobility, illustrate updates to the integrations menu, explain that market segment data from Stayntouch PMS can be received and utilized by TravelClick, demonstrate auto room mapping for Comptroll, explain that rooms sold are now the sum of non-group rooms and group allotment rooms, including component rooms, on the availability screen, illustrate multi-currency display on the availability screen when multi-property functionality is enabled, and finally, explain that property groups display in the availability dropdown when multi-property functionality is enabled if they have at least one user subscribed hotel. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Julia, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Great, thank you.
No problem. All right, let me know if you got it. Perfect.
Perfect. Great, well, we'll jump right in. So the first enhancement that I already mentioned is that the guest balance report and rooms out of order and out of service report, both of those are now exportable via CSV. I went ahead and ran those today, and if I go to my reports inbox, you can see here that now I have the purple download button, which will allow me to download as CSV. For example, I download it, and the CSV file format will allow me to open up in Excel or in another spreadsheet application. That makes it a little bit easier for you to work with in Excel format. The next enhancement is related to multi-property chains. If I go into the settings, and the settings for the chain and property groups, you can see here that this chain already has many property groups added. If I go to delete one, because I decide I don't want it anymore, I get an alert. And what's been enhanced here is what appears on the alert. It's been enhanced to make the text more clear about what will happen. So if I were to click the delete property group button, hotels in this property group will no longer be associated with the property group, and the property group will be deleted from all properties within the chain. The next enhancement is to the budgets functionality. So if I go to the main menu and financials and budgets, you can see here that I've put in some pretty basic numbers. Previously, the budget functionality allowed you to input negative numbers, which is not ideal when you're budgeting revenues. Now, if I wanted to update the amounts, I simply need to put in a positive amount. You can see if I put in a positive amount, I have the green Save Revenue Budget option. However, if I put a negative sign in front of it, it becomes grayed out and I no longer have the ability to save it. So for me to be able to save and edit or to add a new number to the budget, it has to be a positive number. The next enhancement is related to tourist tax. Not all hotels use this, but if you do use this, it would be turned on in financials and financial settings, tourist tax. You can see I already have it toggled on here. This feature has existed for a while. What's been enhanced though is that now I have the ability to add a separate line item on the confirmation letter and group confirmation letter that details the specific tourist tax amount. So if I wanted to add it as a separate line item there, I would go to, in my settings, hotel and staff, stationery, confirmations and cancellations, and then to add it to the guest confirmation, I toggle this down here, toggle down confirmation email, and you'll see I have show tourist tax as a separate item as an option that I can select and save. This will only appear if I have tourist tax turned on in my financial settings. Similarly, if I toggle down group confirmation, at the bottom here, I have show tourist tax as a separate item. And again, I can hit save changes. And now both of those confirmation emails, both for individual reservations and for groups, will now have tourist tax as a separate line. Again, you have to be using tourist tax in financial settings for that to be able to show. If you don't have that turned on, it simply won't appear. Another enhancement that I'm personally really excited about is that there are now additional options for additional schedules with the auto deposit collection functionality. If I come into the hotel and staff and settings and parameters in the back end, you can see at this property, I'm already using auto charge, which is collecting any deposits due during the end of day process automatically. However, now the enhancement is that I have the ability to collect it at 2 more times during the day. So for example, I could say I want them to collect again at 12 p.m. and maybe at 6 p.m. In particular, this is designed to help you collect same day deposits where perhaps you're getting same day reservations and you have a deposit due. By turning this on, you have another 2 more chances to automatically collect the deposit and ensure you have the funds you need before the guest checks in. If I want to turn those times on, I just select the times and hit save changes. The following features are related to the guest kiosk and guest mobility. I have a demo kiosk and a demo mobility screen up here. We'll start with the kiosk. I went ahead and pulled up my reservation that I have due to check in on the kiosk. And you can see here now the new functionality or the new enhancement is that there's now this section here at the bottom that says balance due. And this shows exactly the amount that the guest owes at check-in. Similarly, on the mobile screen, if I scroll down to the bottom, I have this balance due section that shows me exactly what is due or what I owe the hotel at check-in. On the kiosk, if I add an add-on to my reservation, if I select to purchase an add-on during the check-in process, the system has been enhanced on the back end to automatically add that amount to the credit card authorization amount that it's processing at check-in. This will help ensure that you have the funds you need to cover the cost of the add-on at check-in, rather than having to top off the authorization later when the add-on charges have posted. The next enhancement is related to additional guest information. I'm, again, really excited about this one. We all know that it's helpful to collect accompanying guest information prior to arrival or on arrival if you don't have it. This is giving you another chance to collect it prior to arrival, where if the guests are checking in either on the kiosk or on their phone, they now have the ability to add additional guest information when more than one guest is on the reservation. For this reservation, for example, I have 2 guests. My name, Julia Josephson, is the primary guest name, and I have the ability to add the second guest in here. This works the same on mobility. If I flow through to that section, oh no. Well, I think that I selected, maybe it's because I selected a later time. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I was demoing this beforehand, so maybe I messed up my own demo. But if I were to hit continue after I selected my early check-in there, it would prompt me for additional guest information, very similarly to how it shows it here on the kiosk functionality. The next set of enhancements we've made are to the integrations menu in the settings. So if I go to settings and integrations, we've updated the labels and moved some things around and even removed some labels to make the integrations menu a bit more intuitive and to streamline it a bit. The interface logs menu item has been removed, as has the snapshot menu item. We've added a new menu item called utilities. And when you open that up, we've moved the following items into it: EMV terminals, external mappings, PMS Connect ID lookup, workstations, and the area that was previously called monitor screen has now been renamed active integrations and has been moved into the utilities menu. Another item that exists in the utilities menu is external PMS Web Services OWS overlay. It has been moved in here as well, but it is only visible for hotels using the PMS overlay. In this hotel, I'm using the standalone PMS, so I can't see it here. We've also added some other new menu items to the integrations section. There's now an internet booking engine section, a room upsell section, a guest services section, and a business intelligence section called BI. GiveX has been moved to a new section called gift cards, and we've moved iCare services to the payment section. Bright PABX is now under a new menu item called audiovisual, and we've renamed text messaging as guest communications. There have been a couple of other enhancements to specific integrations. One of them is with TravelClick. The integration with TravelClick has been enhanced so that TravelClick can now receive and use market segment data that we send them with your reservations and groups. In the past, we would send them market segment data, but it wasn't able to be received and utilized on the TravelClick side. That's been updated now based on user feedback. The next enhancement to integrations is in Comptroll. Previously, we used to have to map rooms manually under the room mapping section. Now, when you navigate to the room mappings tab, you'll see a new green button that will allow you to automatically map your rooms. By default, if I leave the external room prefix blank, the external room will simply be the room number. The same goes for the external extension prefix. However, if I add an external extension prefix here, for example, it will add the prefix to the room number. And by default, the station access level will be set as 0 equals all allowed. If I hit save changes here, I will get an alert saying that I'm about to initiate auto mapping. This will set the access level to 0 equals all allowed. Do I want to continue? This is a good time to make sure that my prefixes are the way I want them and to hit continue if they are. Now you can see it did all of that work for me. One important thing to note, though, is that this will work incredibly well for hotels that either have no prefix because their room numbers are 4 numbers long, or for hotels that do have a prefix with room numbers that are 3 numbers long. If you have some room numbers that are 3 numbers and some that are 4, which often happens if you have guest room floors up until the 9th floor, and then they continue onwards from the 10th floor onwards. If that's the case, your prefix requirements might mean that you need to do some manual adjusting of the auto mapping to ensure they are correct. For example, I built some dummy rooms here that were the room number, so the room number in the system is 100 on the 1st floor, and then I built 1001 on the 10th floor. In my phone system, though, when I dial room 100, I do have to put a 7 in front of it, but I don't have to put a 7 in front of it when I'm dialing a 4-digit room number. In that case, we would simply want to edit to what it should be, or in this case, since there's no external extension for my hotel, I'm going to simply delete the mappings for these 4-number long rooms. Again, you just have to be aware of those variances in your room numbers, but it will still be much faster generally to do the auto mapping and then edit or delete any ones that you don't need. The next enhancement is on the availability screen. In response to a feature request that the product team received from many hotels, on the availability screen, the rooms sold is now the sum of the group allotment rooms, including component rooms, and non-group rooms. In this group, I built a test group that has 9 rooms on hold. However, one of those 9 is a component room made up of 2 rooms. That's why, even though 9 plus 1 equals 10, it's showing as 11 rooms sold here, because one of those rooms is actually 2 rooms, right, in a component setup. So even though I'm holding 9 rooms and I'm going to have 9 reservations here in the group, one of those reservations is going to technically be using 2 rooms that's in a component room, which means I'm technically using 10 rooms, which combined with my non-group rooms equals 11. Furthermore, the non-groups rooms on the availability screen are now always going to match the count of individual rooms on the Business on the Books report. The last set of enhancements that I want to show you today are related to multi-property. If I go to the availability screen, this is Bayview Tampa is a hotel that is part of a chain, and I have property groups built. And because of that, I now have this show this hotel dropdown, all hotels in the chain, or I can see my property groups here. The property groups dropdown will be displayed on the availability screen if the property group has at least 1 hotel with at least 1 user subscribed. You can see on a property that does not have that, like Stayntouch in here, I don't have that dropdown because this hotel is not multi-property and not part of a chain with property groups. Another cool enhancement to the multi-property property groups is that if I'm on the availability screen and I select property group, or even if I look at all hotels in this chain, this enhancement was released a little while ago where you now can see an overview of all of the properties, right? Or all of the properties in your property group. Now, when I toggle them down, there's been an enhancement made where my bar rate will now show in the property's default currency. So Bayview Tampa is showing the bar rate in US dollars, Rosebud Motel is showing the bar rate in Canadian dollars, and Turtle Beach Hotel is showing the bar rate in euros. And that is all of the enhancements that I had to show you today. I will hand it back to Erin.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Julia, for that insightful presentation. I'd now like to turn over the floor for questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So I'll wait a few seconds for everyone to submit any questions. All right, since there are no questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. So today we showed that the guest balance report and rooms out of order, out of service report are now exportable via CSV. We illustrated the UI enhancements to the alert received upon property group deletion. We demonstrated that budgets do not accept negative values, showed that tourist tax has been added as a separate line item on the confirmation letter and group confirmation letter, discussed the additional schedules option for auto deposit collection, highlighted that balance due will display at check-in for Stayntouch Guest Kiosk and Stayntouch Guest Mobility. We explained that add-ons purchased during check-in are included in authorization for Stayntouch Guest Kiosk, showed that the PMS will prompt for additional guest information during check-in when there is more than 1 guest for Stayntouch Guest Kiosk and Stayntouch Guest Mobility. We illustrated updates to the integrations menu, explained that market segment data from Stayntouch PMS can be received and utilized by TravelClick, demonstrated auto room mapping for Comptroll, explained that rooms sold are now the sum of non-group rooms and group allotment rooms, including component rooms, on the availability screen, illustrated multi-currency display on the availability screen when the multi-property functionality is enabled, and finally explained that property groups display in the availability dropdown when the multi-property functionality is enabled if they have at least 1 user subscribed hotel. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at erin.fisher@stayntouch.com. Thanks again.